Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solve them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the scripts with the digital workspace inner workings.
Welcome, Paul, to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. Delighted to have you on today.
Hi, Heather. Nice to meet you. I'm glad and happy to be here.
Could you give us a brief introduction on yourself for our audience?
Sure. My name is Paul Deur. I'm a co-founder and co-CEO of a SaaS platform called ReadyWorks. ReadyWorks is what's called the Digital Platform Conductor. It's kind of a fancy term that basically means we help large enterprises do digital transformations. We help them do big technical changes across the enterprise. And so our software was something that we built over the years of kind of doing these types of projects. We were operators and consultants in the field doing this type of work. And then we took that experience and the know-how and ultimately translated that into a solution and a product and been taking that to market for the last several years.
So something that we always like to ask guests who come on to the show is what exactly does the digital workspace mean to you?
Well, I guess in its simplest terms, it's really the applications and the devices that we use to do our jobs and to do our functions. You know, that could be any form factor, any location, any device, but essentially it's a combination of the apps and the physical infrastructure that it takes to kind of run your particular function and job.
Great. I think that's a solid definition. So I know you have a background in, as we like to call the IT trenches, doing a lot of these large enterprise transformation projects for some of the Fortune 500. I'm just curious if there's any memorable stories from those times that you'd like to share that our audience might relate to.
Sure. You know, at the end of the day, the devices that we work on are really the tools that are used on a daily basis to kind of get our jobs done. And so when you're making a change to those workspaces, it's disruptive. It's something that people are familiar with. And then the next day it's something different. And there's new tools, there's new elements. And you kind of forget at the end of the day, it's people kind of consuming that. And once you've made an adjustment to that or a change to that has an impact. Sometimes it's favorable and it's an advancement. And sometimes it could be a disruption, and people are sensitive to that. And just recognizing that there's people at the end of it all, right? We're in tech. We deliver a lot of technical solutions, but at the end of the day, it's the peoples who are consumers of that stuff. And you got to be mindful of that. And so when we do these big transformations and we're doing rollouts or migrations for, enterprises with, 50,000, 100,000 people, keeping the people element in there is top of mind, and giving them awareness and an education and a perspective around what's happening, why this is happening, what's it mean to you, how does it help? Just helps kind of soften the reception and it gets more people on board with the idea, and ultimately the success and the momentum of those programs tend to flow a lot better. So kind of anecdotes from the field are just awareness, emails, communications, just reaching out and letting people know what's going on, and then they're kind of opening up and being more welcome to the change as opposed to something being done to them by an IT team. It really just changes the dynamic quite a bit. And one project we had in particular, at the end of it, the office and the organization that we were rolling out, everyone in the company signed us a thank you card.
Wow, you don't get that every day in IT.
Yeah, it was kind of an old school throwback and a welcome one, because we were really pleasantly surprised by just kind of the interaction and the exchange, and it just really made the whole thing well received on all fronts. Wonderful.
Well, yeah, I think that's a great philosophy. The digital is such a big part of the employee experience now, particularly with hybrid and remote work, being much more popular. So I think the human side of IT can't be underestimated. So I know that you have a specialty when it comes to IT rationalization in particular, which can probably be one of the more challenging things to deal with from an end user experience perspective, and certainly one that involves a lot of communication. Could you tell me a bit about how you think about and approach IT rationalization projects?
Yeah, at the end of the day, an organization is buying and provisioning assets and applications and stuff to their staff. And that rationalization effort is always kind of top of mind, especially from the CFO and from the businesses, to make sure that, hey, do we have the right stuff in place? Have we purchased the right elements? Are we not overspending? And do people have the right tools to kind of facilitate what they do? And so, you want to be leaning into that idea of best of breed tech and new stuff, but at the same time, you don't want to be overspending and being perhaps kind of wasteful. And so the idea of rationalization is kind of this intersection of making sure you've got the right stuff for the right audience. But really, the ability to do that is really driven off of data. And as hokey as it sounds, the simple question of who's got what, who's using what, in which functions is not a very easy answer for most enterprises to kind of unpack. Got a lot of tools, they've got a lot of systems, a lot of things that are kind of point solutions, but they often don't talk to one another. And so what it is almost like a kind of an overlay of a lot of different data points, but not very good perspective and not very good insight. And so the idea of rationalization from our perspective really kind of gets driven from data that gives you that pieces of information to make you have an informed decision. And so that's part of what we experienced in the field for the last 20 years. And that was what was the catalyst for building the product that we did to kind of facilitate, how do you rationalize? How do you know who's using what with real insights and real telemetry and real data from those systems, as opposed to, I think this is what they need. And oftentimes that assumption doesn't necessarily marry to the reality. So you kind of eliminate that and do it with a lot more precision.
Totally. I think that data-driven approach is the right one. There's this whole joke about the scream test in IT where you just turn it off and wait to see if someone screams, which might not be, again, coming back to the human element of that digital experience, not so kind.
It translates into a crummy user experience. And at the end of the day, we've all become, massive consumers of all different sorts of services and products. And so if you turn things off and you just wait for people to really give you a bad feedback loop, that's not very elegant or well delivered or well received for that matter. And I think that becomes kind of a downward spiral. So you really want to be more thoughtful about that and recognizing that we are enablers and we're here to serve. And these are just tools that people are using to do their jobs. So if you prevent them from doing that, you're certainly not going to win any friends by that approach.
Yeah. Well, obviously, one of the key things that CIOs are trying to achieve when it comes to IT rationalization is that cost savings. Curious if you have any kind of value stories or, for IT leaders out there who might be interested in taking on these projects or looking for ways to cut costs, what can rationalization help bring to the table?
In today's economic climate, right, where everyone's talking about a looming recession, app rationalization, or just rationalization is kind of a very recurring theme or soundbite that you're hearing these days. But it comes back to the same theme around it's data driven. If you don't know what you've got and you don't know what's deployed and you don't have visibility into how it's being used, you are making decisions in the dark. So for instance, we have one financial services customer. They have about 100,000 users, and at the start of COVID, obviously, everyone was home and they were trying to facilitate their, work from home initiatives and so forth. And then they just started buying equipment and resources to deploy, but again, without a good basis of information and understanding what was what. As a result of that, they purchased to the tune of, I think it was $15 million additional devices and laptops and so forth that now are sitting in inventory and kind of aging because they just didn't have the right data to inform what the purchases were and what they needed for their people to support their functions. So all roads really lead back to kind of that information that's out there, being able to harness it, make sense of it, and then use that to make smart decisions. And then how do you kind of operate? So the idea of kind of cutting back and rationalizing after the fact is almost like putting a Band-Aid after you've gotten cut. The best bet is to be a little bit more thoughtful in the approach out of the gates, and then you are kind of buying as necessary or deploying as required, as opposed to kind of guessing and then see where it lands. Yeah,
that right sizing can really save you, particularly on the hardware side, if you're able to do that from the start. And when it comes to the user experience side of that, again, I think there's also this thought maybe users don't always know what they need or what's best for them. IT can help support that. But sometimes when it comes to rationalization. There can be perhaps irrational, or, people have ties, right, to their devices, to their software. Like, no, I need the full Adobe Creative Cloud suite. I don't care what the subscription costs, even though I'm only using it as a PDF reader. Yes, I need the top of the line Mac, even though, I open the same Excel sheet every day, and, that's where I spend all my time. How can IT kind of manage those conversations and communicate in a way that users understand and doesn't impact their experience?
It's really, I think, there is no silver bullet, because none of the tools and none of the systems have a perfect answer, and oftentimes the business and the users have kind of this hybrid sort of need and perspective. And so really what you want to try to do is bring all of those together in a way that informs the best outcome. So what we do in our philosophy is the tools and the systems give you a good perspective and a fairly good, true north or North Star, if you will, around what the direction to take. But it's very much a consumer sort of experience. And so reaching out to users and soliciting feedback and trying to get input along the way is essential. Because again, if you have the experience that IT is doing this to you, as opposed to we are a part of this thing that the business is trying to do, it's just two completely different experiences. So that bi-directional conversation is essential to understanding what the business needs and then what is the right kind of answer. So we're strong advocates of, here's the data. This is what we think you've got. Hey, Heather, again, this is what the system tells us. This is what we've been able to collect about you. Does this seem right? And almost kind of message that back out to you and say, do you need anything else? Is this the right kit, the right profile? Do you need something bigger? And really just kind of engage in that feedback loop. And then if there are exceptions, then you handle those as kind of the one-offs. The vast majority of people will probably be fine, but at least you've given that experience to kind of normalize or clean up the experience along the way, as opposed to it just being, the heavy hand of you get what you get and you don't get upset.
Definitely. I don't think that ever goes down too well.
Yep.
Well, when it comes to, say I'm a CIO looking for what's the biggest bang for my buck, I'm going to put my team on a rationalization project. Where would you recommend to start looking? Or can you do it all at once? Is that achievable? Or should you kind of start on the hardware side, start on the software side? Where do you kind of, talk to clients about where the greatest opportunities are?
They're really two sides of the same coin. The devices and the applications that run on them are kind of, you need both of those elements in that bit of information to really have an informed answer. And again, that's kind of where we came from, and that's the reason why we've taken this approach to understanding who and what role, and then the hardware and the apps. It's a complete picture, and without one, you really can't make an informed decision on the other side. And so being mindful of spend and being mindful of allocations is essential. Applications, I think, with especially a lot more SaaS applications, you've got the ability to be a bit more kind of dynamic and agile and consume or turn on or off your subscription, versus hardware that's typically a longer life cycle. And once you've owned or leased the asset, you've got it for a longer duration. So I think those tend to be a little bit harder to kind of turn on a dime. But again, those two stories really do come hand in hand, and really got to be thinking of it in a holistic sort of way, as opposed to, somewhat kind of narrow or single threaded on any one individual piece.
Yeah. And I'm curious if there are some other use cases here that have come up for your clients as well. I know, green IT has been a big topic. How can we extend the life of the hardware we have? Or even when it comes to software, aging hardware, things like vulnerability, risk management, how do we know our software isn't out of date and, lacking patches, all of that? Are those things that also come up with your clients as well? Yeah,
absolutely. This story is really kind of one arc, and depending on whom you are in the organization, you might see it from a different perspective. So again, if you're an IT operator, you're thinking about it from the context of, the deployment, the process. How do you get the bits out? How do you deploy those resources? And there's a logistics and a technical kind of perspective. If you're a CFO or someone that's more from the financial perspective, you're looking at the entitlements and the allocations and the spend on those respective assets or those applications. If you're a CISO, you're thinking about those same elements with the risk vectors that they propose. Are they dated? Are they out of date? Are they not patched or incompliant? And does that give us kind of a vulnerability or an exposure that we need to be mindful of? And if you were thinking about it from the business perspective, we want to have the latest and greatest capabilities so we can be innovative, so we can bring the best products and service to our customers and not be quote unquote laggards in the field of technical adoption. So they're all the same talking points. Just kind of depends on which perspective you have and your audience, but all of that kind of comes together in harmony around what's the right decision to make. So again, if we're on a back office worker in a call center, we can get by with hardware that's a pretty lean profile with very, very kind of narrow specs, and we know that is not really going to deviate, as opposed to someone that's maybe a creative that needs better resources and better capacity and different tools to do something different, and all of those elements really kind of come together around making the right decisions around what to purchase and when. And so I think there's a natural tendency to, kind of arbitrarily cut or look for the fat where it's obvious. And, there's always room for being prudent and fiscally kind of conservative. But if you're really looking for kind of the thoughtful insights around the marriage of the right thing and the right tool for the right person, that requires a bit more, a little bit more deeper digging. And again, it needs to be data driven because otherwise you're really just guessing. And more oftentimes than not, it's going to be probably, not the right fit.
Well, maybe just to transition into the future of, where we're going in the digital workplace and where IT is headed, as someone who works in the IT rationalization space, you have this company, are there any innovations that excite you, or where do you see the future of this space going?
I think what you're continuing to see is this ramp up of just infrastructure everywhere, right? There's more devices, there's more things and more ways to consume that than there ever were before, and it's only going to continue to grow. You think about the work from anywhere sort of initiative really just eliminated the tether between someone being in a physical location and doing work. And then when you go to a store or a bank or a dealership or whatever, your consumer experience is fundamentally changing. And that's represented by IoT devices and sensors and data that kind of facilitates a richer experience. So I think the trends are that you're going to just see more of a heterogeneous ecosystem of stuff, vendors, parts, sensors, and devices in a lot of different form factors than you're probably accustomed to today. And all of those things have got to kind of flow in concert for that to happen efficiently. And with that many moving parts, you've got to, again, apply the next level of intelligence and the next level of tooling to kind of do that in a more agile sort of way. The old approaches of just a few years ago really are no longer kind of holding water in today's sort of ecosystem of how people are accustomed to working, the experiences that they expect. Again, I'll give you another example. We have one client who is making a transformation from their old banking system, which was a mainframe application that was decades old, to a new modern approach. And that is a function of, the markets today are calling for crypto. They're calling for, 401ks and and things that didn't exist a few years ago, in an older application setting. So that whole experience has changed because the banking customers are looking for something different. And so that means when they go into the branch and they go into the store, or when they go into wherever, there's a different experience. And so all of those things really kind of come together in full circle about how do you determine the right profile, the right use, the right tools, the right whatever, and how do you kind of live in that life cycle of the digital workspace experience? You've got to lean into new tooling, new approaches, and really that's kind of what we're excited about on the ReadyWorks side, and kind of what we do as this digital platform conductor is kind of sitting at that intersection to bring all those parts together and manage that at scale for large enterprises.
Oh, it's really interesting. So you're saying this is more of a kind of continuous process where it might not have been kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me one thing that that's static, that isn't changing, and that you don't know in another 2-3 weeks or months there's going to be a new version, a new rev, or a new device that's going to fundamentally kind of be different from what you're doing now. that pace and that flywheel effect is only going to continue to accelerate with more moving parts. And so, if you kind of extrapolate where we are today and what that's going to be, and not the distant future, you can't keep doing that with legacy tools and an old approach and maybe just some kind of rigid kind of models that just don't work any longer. There's a different approach, and there's a more modern sort of way to handle that.
Definitely. Well, as we come up on time here, are there any words of advice you would give to our audience? Is there one thing you wish every CIO out there knew today, or a perspective you'd like to share?
I think that there are some incredibly creative, innovative people that are bringing together different technologies and different approaches to tackle these types of challenges as they are evolving and kind of taking on new shape and form. Things like AI, ML, automation, and other elements like that, right? Those are technologies that are being applied to very, very unique use cases. And, again, if COVID hadn't taught us anything, it's you've got to recognize things are different. And if that wasn't a catalyst to adopt or lean into maybe some different approaches or think about next gen of technologies to kind of facilitate that, you're going to be kind of left in a perhaps a somewhat rigid and narrow legacy sort of perspective. And what I would encourage folks to continue to do is just evaluate and explore what that might look like, because everyone's super busy and it's hard to stop what you're doing and perhaps explore other approaches. But these are the types of things that are really transforming how we live and work. And you have to kind of embrace that as kind of the norm. And that would be kind of the recommendation for CIOs and other technical IO leaders.
Great. Well, if a listener wants to get in touch or learn more about yourself or ReadyWorks, how can they find you?
ReadyWorks.com. That's the name of the organization, and all the social handles are essentially in the same profile. But you can find this in the Gartner research around the digital platform conductor, and on the site there's a bunch of collateral materials in that regard, where we're looking to share with folks, kind of what those use cases are, how we facilitate and how we help, and how we bring together some of those elements of technology to tackle these types of digital workspace sorts of challenges and these modern motions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, Paul, and for all your great insights on the great world of IT rationalization within the digital workspace. Really important and timely topic.
Oh, thanks for chatting, and happy to be here.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website, www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website, www.digitalworkspace.works, and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.